Hello, Midnights. We hope you enjoy our stories. Next for you, the truth about Native American spirituality. Let us know where you are listening from and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. This profound teaching, widely recognized as reflecting indigenous wisdom, encapsulates the core philosophy of deep reverence and intergenerational responsibility that underpins Native American spiritual practices. These practices, incredibly diverse across hundreds of distinct tribes and nations, each hold unique beliefs and customs. Yet, many share profound themes of interconnectedness with the spiritual world, including deep relationships with spirits and, in some cases, concepts that might be interpreted as summoning or shape-shifting. It's vital to approach these topics with immense respect, understanding them within their proper cultural context to avoid misinterpretations and the harmful practice of cultural appropriation. What if the very mountains around you held ancient secrets, whispered through the wind, or the animals you encountered were not just creatures, but wise teachers or even ancestral guides? Imagine a world where your well-being isn't just about your body, but the balance of your spirit, your community, and the land itself. This isn't fantasy, it's the living reality of Native American spirituality, a profound tapestry of beliefs that offers a powerful counter-narrative to modern disconnection. It's a journey into a worldview where every element of existence is alive, sacred, and interconnected, a perspective that holds vital lessons for our contemporary world facing ecological crises and a yearning for deeper meaning. This deep spiritual connection is not merely a historical relic, but a vibrant, evolving force that shapes daily life, communal decisions, and environmental stewardship, echoing ancient wisdom that feels increasingly urgent today. To truly grasp Native American spirituality, one must acknowledge the profound historical context that has shaped its resilience and survival. For centuries, indigenous peoples in the Americas faced colonization, forced assimilation, and systematic attempts to eradicate their cultures and spiritual beliefs. This was not a passive process, but an active campaign of cultural genocide. The U.S. government, for example, implemented policies like the Indian Removal Act of 1830, leading to forced migrations such as the Trail of Tears, which devastated communities and disconnected people from their sacred ancestral lands, a fundamental component of their spiritual practice. Beyond forced relocation, the notorious Indian boarding school system, which operated from the mid-19th to the late 20th century, stands as a stark example of this aggressive assimilation. Hundreds of thousands of Native children were forcibly removed from their families and communities and sent to these institutions, where they were forbidden to speak their native languages, wear traditional clothing, or practice their spiritual ways. Their hair, often considered sacred, was cut, and their names were changed. The explicit goal, as encapsulated by Captain Richard Henry Pratt's infamous motto, was to kill the Indian, save the man, effectively erasing indigenous identity and spirituality. Moreover, many specific ceremonial dances and spiritual gatherings, such as the Sun Dance of the Plains Nations or the Ghost Dance movement, were explicitly outlawed and violently suppressed by federal authorities and agents, leading to massacres like Wounded Knee in 1890. This official persecution of Native American religious practices only officially ended with the passage of the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, ARFA, in 1978. Even then, ARFA, while a crucial step, has been criticized for being largely declarative and lacking strong enforcement mechanisms, often failing to protect sacred sites or ensure access to traditional resources in the face of development or resource extraction. Despite this profound multi-generational oppression, indigenous spiritual practices have shown incredible resilience. Many traditions were preserved secretly, passed down through generations through clandestine ceremonies and oral histories shared in hushed tones, often by dedicated elders, particularly women, who risked everything to safeguard their ancestral ways. This perseverance against overwhelming odds has allowed for a vibrant revitalization in recent decades, with communities actively reclaiming and strengthening their spiritual heritage, demonstrating an enduring strength of spirit that continues to inspire. To understand these deep spiritual paths, several key terms are helpful. Animism is not merely an abstract belief, but a foundational worldview for many Native American cultures, where all objects, places, and creatures possess a distinct, vital spiritual essence. This extends beyond human perception to a lived experience of deep interconnectedness, where the entire universe, from a specific rock formation or an ancient tree to The flowing wind or a particular animal, even human-made tools, is seen as alive, imbued with spiritual power, and deserving of respect and reciprocal relationship. This pervasive sense of life and spirit in everything means that the natural world is not a resource to be exploited, but a family of relations to be honored. Cultural appropriation is a critical concept in this discussion. It refers to the unacknowledged or inappropriate adoption of the customs, practices, ideas, or intellectual property of one people or society by members of another, typically a more dominant and privileged group. In the context of Native American spirituality, this often manifests as non-Native individuals taking sacred ceremonies, symbols, or spiritual teachings out of their original, deeply meaningful contexts, often for personal gain, trendiness, or a superficial sense of spirituality. This act is profoundly disrespectful as it trivializes practices that have survived centuries of violent suppression, disregards the original community's ownership and meaning, and contributes to the ongoing economic marginalization of Indigenous artists and practitioners. Closely related is the concept of Indigenous intellectual property, which refers to the inherent rights of Indigenous peoples to control, protect, and benefit from their traditional knowledge, cultural expressions, genetic resources, and spiritual practices. This concept is vital in discussions of spiritual practices, as it asserts Indigenous communities' inherent ownership and their sovereign right to regulate the use and dissemination of their sacred knowledge, preventing its commodification and misrepresentation by outsiders. Reciprocity is another fundamental principle, a dynamic, balanced relationship between humans and the natural and spiritual world. It is a continuous exchange of energy and blessings, a conscious act of giving back in equal measure to what one receives. This is expressed through offerings, prayers, respectful interaction with the environment, and the understanding that all actions have consequences that ripple through the interconnected web of life. Smudging is a sacred purification practice common to many Native American and Indigenous traditions. It involves the burning of specific sacred herbs such as sage, sweetgrass, cedar, or tobacco in a ceremonial bowl, with the smoke used to purify oneself, a space, or an object. Its purpose is to cleanse negative energy, invite positive energy or prayers, and prepare for spiritual work, creating a sacred atmosphere. A vision quest is a profound rite of passage and spiritual journey in many Native American cultures, undertaken by individuals seeking guidance, understanding, or a transformative vision from the spirit world. This often involves periods of solitude in nature, fasting, and intense prayer, serving as a powerful means of personal growth and spiritual revelation. The specific practices and interpretations of vision quests vary widely by tribe, reflecting unique spiritual paths and protocols. Traditional ecological knowledge tech is a cumulative, evolving body of knowledge, practices, and beliefs about the relationships between living beings and their environment that has been developed by Indigenous peoples over countless generations through direct observation and deep interaction. Tech is profoundly rooted in Native American cultural and spiritual traditions and is crucial for sustainable living, holistic well-being, and effective land stewardship, offering insights often overlooked by Western scientific approaches. A plastic shaman or plastic medicine person is a derogatory term used by Native Americans to describe non-Native individuals, or sometimes Native individuals not genuinely trained or recognized by their community, who falsely claim to be Native American spiritual leaders. They often profit from selling inauthentic ceremonies, workshops, or spiritual guidance, exploiting Indigenous traditions for personal gain without genuine understanding, proper lineage, or community accountability, thereby causing significant harm. Finally, it's crucial to understand that the concepts of sacred and secular are not distinct categories. In many Native American worldviews, spiritual practices are deeply intertwined, with daily life integral to cultural identity, communal well-being, and individual and collective health, blurring the lines between what is considered religious and everyday. Many Native American cultures believe the entire universe is alive and interconnected, permeated by a powerful, all-encompassing energy often referred to as the Creator or Great Spirit, or by other specific tribal names that vary widely across languages and cosmologies. This is rarely a single anthropomorphic deity in the Abrahamic sense, but rather a vital, dynamic, omnipresent force, a foundational principle of existence, found in everything, from a specific rock to the flowing wind, a particular plant, or an animal, and indeed within humanity itself. This worldview emphasizes that all living things, including the land itself, are relations, fostering a deep kinship and ethical responsibility towards the entire natural world. This means that animals are not merely resources but spiritual beings. Plants are teachers and healers, and geographical features like mountains, rivers, and caves hold powerful spiritual significance as places of ceremony, vision, and connection to the ancestors. The concept of reciprocity is central here, governing interactions not just among people but with all of creation. It is a constant, conscious act of balancing the giving and receiving within the web of life. For instance, when a hunter takes an animal, traditional practices almost invariably involve giving thanks through prayer or song, making an offering like tobacco, cornmeal, or a piece of one's own hair, and utilizing all parts of the animal, thereby recognizing the spirit of the animal and maintaining balance with the natural world. This is not just about environmentalism in a modern sense, but a profound spiritual covenant. The health of the land, the animals, and the people are seen as intrinsically linked, interdependent in a complex web of spiritual and material existence. Disrupting one part of this web can have far-reaching spiritual consequences. A core aspect of this connection involves spirit animals or guardian spirits, seen as powerful spiritual allies and guides, offering wisdom, protection, and direction to individuals or tribes. These powerful spiritual allies often appear in dreams, visions, or during significant spiritual experiences like vision quests, providing clarity, strength, or insight into one's life path or purpose. The significance of a particular animal might also be tied to tribal totems or clan systems, which define social structure, roles, and identity within a nation, carrying specific responsibilities and inherent connections for all members of that clan. For example, the bear might symbolize strength, healing, and courage for some Plains tribes, and its appearance in a vision could signify a call to healing or leadership. Conversely, the salmon is central to the spiritual life of many Pacific Northwest nations, representing not only physical sustenance but also abundance, perseverance, and the sacred cycle of life and death that sustains their communities, and ceremonies often revolve around its annual return. Spiritual leaders, known by various specific tribal titles like Wikasawakan among the Lakota Dean Hatali among the Navajo, or simply as medicine people or traditional healers, act as crucial mediators between the physical and spiritual realms. Their roles are multifaceted and deeply integrated into the community's well-being, often encompassing healing of body and spirit, divination, guiding ceremonies, resolving conflicts, and maintaining balance within the community and with the natural world. They are the custodians of generational knowledge, often trained through years or even decades of rigorous apprenticeship under an elder, involving intense spiritual discipline, specific dietary restrictions, prolonged isolation, and adherence to strict protocols and ethical codes, requiring lifelong dedication and sacrifice. This training is not merely academic, it is experiential and deeply spiritual, involving direct communication with the spirit world, memorization of intricate oral histories, and mastery of complex ceremonial practices. Sacred ceremonies and rituals, such as sweat lodges in Ipi, purification ceremonies symbolizing entry into Mother Earth's womb for cleansing, and prayer, offering a powerful spiritual renewal, talking circles, structured discussions fostering open communication, collective wisdom and healing of communal rifts, and highly complex annual gatherings like the Sun Dance, practiced by various Plains nations for renewal, sacrifice, prayer, and community well-being, often involving physical hardship as an offering, are fundamental to establishing and maintaining these spiritual connections. Beyond these, there are countless other ceremonies, naming ceremonies to welcome new life and affirm identity, coming-of-age rites to guide youth into adulthood with spiritual wisdom, harvest festivals to give thanks for the abundance of the land, and healing ceremonies tailored to specific ailments, often involving drumming, singing, and the use of sacred plants. Practices like smudging and grounding rituals also help create a sacred space, purify participants, and attune individuals to spiritual frequencies, preparing them for deeper engagement with the spirit world by clearing mental and spiritual clutter. Storytelling plays an incredibly vital role in transmitting spiritual knowledge across generations. Myths, legends, epic cycles, and oral histories are not merely entertaining narratives. They are living repositories of profound spiritual lessons, ethical guidelines, cosmology, historical memory, and explanations of the natural and supernatural world. These stories, often passed down word for word for centuries, reinforce cultural values and spiritual cosmology, shaping individual and communal understanding of their place in the universe and their responsibilities to it. They teach about the origins of the world, the relationships between humans and animals, the importance of balance, and the consequences of violating sacred laws. Language itself is often considered sacred, as spiritual concepts are deeply embedded within native languages, where words carry layers of meaning, ancestral memory, and direct connection to specific landscapes, plants, animals, and spiritual entities that are often untranslatable into English without significant loss of nuance. This makes language revitalization efforts critically important for the continuity of spiritual practices and the transmission of indigenous knowledge, as the full spiritual meaning of a ceremony or teaching often lies within the structure and specific vocabulary of the native tongue. At the heart of many Native American spiritual practices lies a holistic worldview that doesn't separate the physical from the spiritual or humanity from nature. This is powerfully articulated in traditional ecological knowledge, TEK, which is far more than just environmental science. TEK emphasizes deep, reciprocal relationships with all elements of the natural world, recognizing plants, animals, and landscapes as sentient beings with their own spirits and inherent rights. It is a living, cumulative body of knowledge, practices, and beliefs about the relationships between living beings and their environment that has been developed by indigenous peoples over countless generations through meticulous observation, practical experimentation, and deep adaptation to local environments. This knowledge translates into highly effective sustainable practices, such as precise rotational harvesting of plants to ensure their perennial return, selective hunting that respects animal populations and ensures their future abundance, and the strategic use of controlled fire, often referred to as cultural burning, to manage landscapes, prevent catastrophic wildfires, and promote biodiversity and regeneration of specific plant species. For example, the Karuk tribe in California has actively fought for decades to restore traditional burning practices that prevent catastrophic wildfires and promote healthy forest ecosystems, a practice deeply intertwined with their spiritual beliefs and ancestral responsibilities to care for the land. This interwoven relationship with the land also forms the basis of indigenous perspectives on spiritual healing. Illness, whether physical, mental, or emotional, is often viewed as a symptom of spiritual, social, or environmental imbalance, not just a physical ailment. Healing therefore addresses the root causes of disharmony across these interconnected levels, often involving elaborate ceremonies, communication with ancestors and spirit guides. The ceremonial use of traditional plant medicines within a profound spiritual framework, and the restoration of balance within the individual, the family, the community, and with the natural and spirit worlds. When the term summoning is used in a Western context, it often implies a magical act of commanding or compelling a spirit to appear and serve one's will, akin to invoking a genie for personal gain. This is a fundamental misrepresentation of how Native Americans typically interact with the spirit world. Instead, indigenous practices focus on invoking, calling upon, or connecting with spirits, emphasizing a relationship built on reciprocity, deep respect, humility, and careful protocol, rather than control or coercion. These are not acts of force, but heartfelt appeals for guidance, assistance, or to restore balance within a complex spiritual ecosystem. The purpose of such connections is rarely for personal power or selfish gain, nor is it about manipulating spiritual forces for trivial ends. Instead, it is almost always for profound collective benefits, healing, seeking spiritual intervention for physical, emotional, or community illnesses, believing that spiritual harmony is key to overall well-being, guidance, gaining wisdom, for challenging decisions facing the individual or the community, interpreting dreams, or understanding the spiritual messages embedded in the natural world during times of uncertainty, protection, invoking protective energies against negative influences, spiritual intrusions, or physical harm, for individuals or the community, especially when facing external threats, community well-being, ensuring harmony, prosperity, and ecological balance for the entire tribal collective, often related to successful agricultural cycles, abundant hunting seasons, or the health of specific ecological systems, and maintaining balance, participating in ceremonies that restore equilibrium between humans and the natural and spiritual world, acknowledging sacred contracts and responsibilities that have been passed down through generations. For example, some Pueblo nations conduct intricate rain dances, not to command the rain, but to respectfully appeal to the cloud and rain spirits for their life-giving essence, recognizing the vital role these spirits play in sustaining their crops and people. Similarly, hunters may offer prayers and tobacco to animal spirits before a hunt, asking for permission to take a life and promising to use every part of the animal, thereby maintaining a reciprocal relationship. Crucially, these practices are still very much alive and performed today, a testament to enduring faith and cultural continuity. Despite centuries of immense pressure and attempted suppression, Native American spiritual traditions have shown incredible resilience. Many ceremonies, including those that involve invoking spiritual presences and fostering connections with the spirit world, are regularly conducted across tribal nations throughout North America, sometimes openly and sometimes in more private, protected settings. This continuation is a testament to the strength, dedication, and deep faith of Indigenous communities in preserving and revitalizing their cultural heritage, often passed down through generations by elders who safeguarded the knowledge at great personal risk. The methods of engaging with the spirit world are diverse and deeply integrated into ceremonial life, always requiring specific preparation and adherence to ancient protocols. It is crucial to emphasize that detailed step-by-step instructions for these sacred practices cannot and will not be provided, as such information is culturally sensitive, often exclusive to initiated members, and its public dissemination would constitute a profound act of appropriation and disrespect, undermining the very principles of Indigenous intellectual property this article upholds. However, general insights into the approach, qualities, and principles of these interactions can be shared to deepen understanding. Individuals typically undertake rigorous spiritual, mental, and physical preparation before engaging in deep spiritual work. This might involve periods of fasting, abstaining from food and sometimes water to cleanse the body and sharpen the spirit, purification rituals such as participating in a sweat lodge ceremony to spiritually and physically purify oneself, sustained prayer and meditation to focus intention, and a strict adherence to ethical conduct, ensuring the individual's intention is pure, humble, and aligned with community values and spiritual laws. Sacred spaces, whether natural sites like specific mountains, caves, or river confluences considered inherently powerful and revered, or specially constructed ceremonial structures such as lodges or arbors, are also meticulously prepared. This preparation involves physical cleansing, the offering of sacred tobacco or other traditional items, and the precise placement of sacred objects, or symbols, all intended to establish a clear boundary between the ordinary world and the spiritual realms, and invite beneficial spiritual forces. The timing of ceremonies often aligns with natural cycles, solstices, equinoxes, new or full moon phases, or specific animal migrations or plant harvesting seasons, reflecting the deep connection to the rhythms and energies of the earth and the cosmos. Heartfelt prayers, often expressed in native languages, accompanied by specific sacred songs and the rhythmic beat of drums, often seen as the heartbeat of the Mother Earth, or rattles, are primary conduits for communication with the spirit world. These are not merely sounds or words, but vibrations intended to alter consciousness, create a vibrational bridge to the spirit world, and invite spiritual presence. The songs often carry ancient wisdom, specific invocations for particular spirits or purposes, and are taught through rigorous oral tradition passed down through generations. The drum connects participants to the primal pulse of creation and can facilitate a profound communal spiritual experience, unifying participants in a shared spiritual journey. Ceremonial dances are a form of embodied prayer and storytelling, allowing participants to physically express their connection to the spirit world, enact spiritual narratives, and invite spiritual energy and transformation. Each movement, the wearing of specific regalia, and the use of props often carry profound symbolic and spiritual meaning, representing animal spirits, ancestors, or cosmic forces, turning the body into a conduit for spiritual expression. Altered states of consciousness, sometimes achieved through intense fasting and solitude, as in a vision quest, or through the guided ceremonial use of specific sacred plants, always under the direct expert guidance of a recognized spiritual leader and within the proper cultural context. are profound avenues for spirits to impart wisdom, reveal truths, or appear in significant forms, providing deep personal insights and communal direction. Dreams are also widely seen as direct communication from the spirit world, carrying important messages for the dreamer or the community, and often require interpretation by an elder or knowledge keeper who understands the complex symbolism within the tribal cosmology. Certain objects, for instance sacred pipes, medicine bundles, ceremonial regalia, specific stones or masks, and natural geographical locations such as mountains, rivers, caves, ancient burial grounds, or specific rock formations, are imbued with immense spiritual power and serve as conduits for connection to the ancestors and the spirit world. These places and objects are not merely symbolic, they are understood to be alive with spiritual energy, holding memory, and often considered living entities themselves, essential for specific spiritual work. The role of spiritual leaders in facilitating these connections cannot be overstated. They undergo extensive training, often from a young age, learning intricate protocols, songs, narratives, and knowledge specific to their lineage and tribe. They act as skilled navigators of the spiritual realms, guiding individuals and communities safely and effectively, and understanding the immense responsibilities and potential dangers involved in interacting with powerful spiritual forces. It is their deep connection, knowledge, and ethical framework that ensures interactions with the spirit world are beneficial, respectful, and aligned with tribal values and the well-being of the entire community. To attempt such connections without proper guidance and profound cultural understanding is not only ineffective, but can be deeply disrespectful, spiritually dangerous, and even harmful to the individual and the community, leading to spiritual imbalance or even physical harm. The concept of shapeshifting is present in some Native American folklore, but its meaning is often more profound than a literal physical transformation, frequently residing in the spiritual, symbolic, or internal realm. It can represent shedding the ego and gaining perspective, which is the ability to transcend human limitations and deeply identify with the instincts and qualities of an animal, viewing the world through a non-human lens, thereby fostering empathy and a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of all life. This profound shift in perspective can offer solutions to complex human problems by allowing one to see from a different angle, such as the predatory awareness of a wolf or the serene patience of an eagle. It can also signify embodying animal qualities, a spiritual merging where an individual might not physically change, but spiritually embody the cunning of a coyote, the strength of a bear, the swiftness of a deer, or the soaring freedom of an eagle in their actions, spiritual essence, or even in times of profound need or insight. This is a powerful spiritual adoption of those qualities, allowing the individual to draw upon inherent animal powers to achieve specific ends or to express a deep, innate connection to that animal. Furthermore, ceremonial representation is a significant aspect, where in many tribal ceremonies, particularly dances, performers wear animal pelts, feathers, or masks and mimic animal movements. This is a profound spiritual act, not merely a performance or impersonation, intended to honor the animal, activate an instinctual connection, and draw upon that animal's spiritual power for the benefit of the community, or to reenact sacred stories. For example, the Kwakiutl, Kwakwaka'wakw people of the Pacific Northwest have elaborate mask dances where performers physically and symbolically transform into animal and mythical beings during their potlatch ceremonies, which are grand feasts and gatherings that renew community ties and spiritual connections, reaffirming ancestral relationships and social status. These transformations are deeply symbolic, speaking to the fluidity of being and the intimate bond between humans and the spirit world. Additionally, dream and visionary transformations are also significant, where in dreams or vision quests, individuals might experience themselves transforming into an animal, receiving profound messages or powers through this spiritual metamorphosis that guides their life path or provides solutions to communal challenges. These experiences are deeply personal and are understood to be direct communications from the spirit world. However, it is vital to understand the fundamental difference between these two concepts: invoking, connecting with spirits, and shapeshifting. Invoking or connecting with spirits is primarily about relationship and communication, where an individual or community seeks to interact with a separate spiritual entity, a guardian spirit, an ancestral spirit, the creator, or a spirit of a place or animal, to gain guidance, healing, protection, or to express gratitude and maintain balance. The person remains distinct from the spirit, establishing a respectful dialogue or connection, and the focus is on receiving wisdom, blessings, or assistance from the spirit world. This is akin to a humble petition or a request from one being to another, based on an established reciprocal relationship. In contrast, shape-shifting is about transformation or embodiment. It refers to a shift in one's own being, perspective, or even physical manifestation, often by taking on the characteristics or form of an animal. It can mean spiritually merging with the essence of an animal to gain its wisdom or abilities, or a more literal, though typically secret and sacred, and never discussed or revealed to outsiders change in form found in specific spiritual traditions. The individual is not communicating with an external spirit in the same way, but rather becoming or embodying another aspect of existence, or manifesting a particular spiritual power inherent within themselves, or granted by deep spiritual connection that allows for such a profound shift. In essence, invoking is about interaction between separate entities, while shapeshifting is about intra-action or transformation, a change within or of oneself, or a manifestation of one's own deeper spiritual connection to other forms of life. Both are profound spiritual concepts, rooted in the belief of a fluid, interconnected cosmos, but they represent distinct types of engagement with spiritual power and being. It's crucial to distinguish these nuanced concepts from malevolent figures like skinwalkers Naldushi in Navajo culture. Skinwalkers are not benevolent shapeshifters or spiritual leaders, but terrifying figures considered witches who have twisted their spiritual knowledge for evil. They are believed to be individuals who have undergone dark rituals to acquire the ability to transform into animalistic forms, specifically for the purpose of causing harm, spreading disease, or death. They are the antithesis of traditional values and the proper use of sacred knowledge, serving as a cautionary tale against the misuse of spiritual power and the dangers of spiritual corruption. Their existence highlights the profound ethical framework within indigenous spiritual systems, where spiritual power is meant to be used for the good of the community, not for personal malevolent purposes. The issue of cultural appropriation is a significant and painful concern for Native American communities, often seen as a continuation of colonial practices that deny indigenous peoples their indigenous intellectual property rights and disrespect their sacred ways. As Dr. Adrienne Keene, Cherokee Nation, a leading scholar on indigenous issues and creator of the Native Appropriations blog, incisively states, when you take a sacred spiritual practice out of its context, you strip it of its meaning. You are taking something that is deeply meaningful to a community and trivializing it. This trivialization has profound consequences. Examples of this abound, including the widespread sale of commercialized smudge kits by non-native retailers, which has led to overharvesting and poaching of white sage and other sacred plants from tribal lands and ancestral territories. This is not merely an economic issue or a superficial misunderstanding, it's an ecological one that disrupts traditional practices, harms sacred plants vital for indigenous ceremonies, and impacts the ability of indigenous communities to practice their spiritual ways sustainably, often violating principles of tech and their inherent rights to these resources. The commodification of sage by corporations, often sold in convenience stores or online, removes it from its sacred context and encourages unsustainable harvesting methods that threaten the plant's very existence in the wild, directly undermining the indigenous ethic of reciprocal environmental stewardship. Similarly, Vision Quest retreats and plastic shamans offering authentic Native American ceremonies, workshops, or healings for a fee are a rampant problem. These individuals and groups often lack proper cultural knowledge, elder guidance, and spiritual integrity, creating potentially dangerous and deeply offensive counterfeits of sacred practices. The consequences can be severe. There have been documented cases of injuries and even deaths at such unregulated, inauthentic ceremonies led by plastic shamans, due to a profound lack of understanding of traditional safety protocols, spiritual guidance, and the necessary physical and mental preparation. These tragic incidents not only endanger participants, but also bring disrepute and suspicion upon legitimate indigenous practices, making it harder for Native peoples to practice their own traditions freely and safely. Furthermore, Indian-inspired fashion that uses sacred symbols, headdresses, or traditional patterns without permission from tribal communities is another pervasive form of appropriation. Such acts trivialize profound cultural and spiritual symbols, reducing them to mere aesthetics, and prevent Native artists from profiting from their own heritage. while non-natives commercialize it for profit or fleeting trends. These pervasive acts of appropriation not only trivialize sacred practices but also perpetuate harmful stereotypes, erase the distinct identities of individual tribes, and ignore the ongoing struggles of indigenous peoples for self-determination and economic justice. They represent a continued colonization of indigenous knowledge and spiritual domains, undermining the very sovereignty that Native nations strive to uphold. Historically, the suppression of Native American spiritual practices was a deliberate and calculated tool of genocide and cultural erasure, aiming to dismantle indigenous societies from within. While the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, AIRFA, of 1978, was enacted to nominally protect these rights, its limitations have become painfully clear, with challenges persisting regarding the protection of sacred sites and the freedom to practice. For instance, ongoing battles over the protection of sites like Oak Flat, Chichilbildagotil, and Apache in Arizona, a sacred site for the San Carlos Apache Nation threatened by a massive copper mining project, or Mauna Kea in Hawaii for Native Hawaiians, a sacred mountain threatened by the construction of telescopes, highlight this persistent struggle for spiritual sovereignty, the inherent right of indigenous nations to govern and protect their own spiritual ways, lands, and resources without external interference. These conflicts are not merely land disputes, they are profound struggles for cultural survival, as the spiritual practices are inextricably linked to specific geographical locations. Furthermore, the disproportionate impact of climate change on indigenous communities adds another layer of complexity to their spiritual resilience. Rising sea levels threaten coastal tribal lands, changing weather patterns disrupt traditional food sources like salmon runs or wild rice beds, and increased wildfires or droughts impact the availability of plants and animals essential for ceremonies, further disrupting spiritual practices intrinsically linked to the land and its cycles. Short-term implications of cultural appropriation include deep offense, the trivialization of profound sacred meaning, economic exploitation of indigenous artisans and knowledge keepers, and the perpetuation of harmful stereotypes that prevent broader understanding. Long-term, it actively hinders genuine reconciliation between indigenous and non-indigenous peoples, contributes to the further erosion of indigenous knowledge systems and language, as spiritual teachings are often embedded in native languages, and when the practice is appropriated, the language and its nuance are lost, leads to ecological damage through unsustainable practices, and fundamentally undermines tribal sovereignty and self-determination. It is imperative to recognize that the spiritual practices mentioned in this article, particularly those concerning interactions with spirits or transformative abilities, are not monolithic across Native American tribes. Each of the over 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States, along with numerous state-recognized and unrecognized indigenous nations, possesses its own unique cosmology, ceremonies, languages, and protocols for engaging with the spiritual realm. Therefore, providing a comprehensive list of all known native U.S. American native tribes and their possibility of summoning is not only an impractical task due to the sheer number and the private, deeply held nature of many traditions, but it would also be ethically irresponsible and a profound act of cultural disrespect. Detailed knowledge of specific spiritual practices, including precise methods of invocation, the nature of particular spirit helpers, or the nuances of ceremonial shape-shifting, is often sacred and private, reserved for initiated members or spiritual leaders, context-dependent, and explicitly not for public consumption or commercialization. Attempts to categorize or quantify such deeply personal and communal spiritual relationships for external scrutiny risk reducing profound traditions to simplistic, often misinterpreted concepts, thereby stripping them of their sacred meaning and power. The true possibility of summoning or engaging in profound spiritual transformation lies not in a generalized ability, but in the specific, respectful, and reciprocal relationships cultivated by individual tribal members and their spiritual leaders within their unique ceremonial frameworks, guided by generations of accumulated wisdom and strict protocols. While specific spiritual practices are not for public dissection, it is important to acknowledge the diverse tapestry of Native American nations and their enduring presence. Some of the most widely known tribal nations in the U.S., often recognized for their significant populations, historical impact, or cultural contributions, include the Cherokee Nation primarily in Oklahoma, also the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians in North Carolina and United Kiowa Band of Cherokee Indians in Oklahoma, recognized for their written language and complex governance. The Navajo Nation dying across Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, the largest reservation by land area in the U.S., and known for their rich oral traditions and intricate weaving. The Choctaw Nation in Oklahoma, with also the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians, and Jenna Band of Choctaw Indians in Louisiana, known for their historical resilience and stickball games. The Sioux Nation, comprising Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota tribes across various states like North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Minnesota, renowned for their historical presence on the Great Plains, their warrior societies. And the Sundance, the Ojibwe Chippewa, inhabiting the Great Lakes region, including Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and North Dakota, recognized for their extensive use of wild rice and birch bark canoes. The various Apache nations across Arizona, New Mexico, and Oklahoma, such as Mescalero, Jicarilla, San Carlos, and White Mountain, known for their adaptability and profound spiritual connection to the land. The Iroquois Confederacy Haudenosaunee, including the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora, primarily in New York, an ancient political and spiritual alliance that inspired aspects of the U.S. Constitution. The Muskogee Creek Nation in Oklahoma, with historical ties to the Southeast, known for their communal towns and green corn ceremony. The Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina, the largest tribe in North Carolina, recognized for their strong community and cultural pride. The Blackfeet Nation in Montana, known for their connection to bison and the vast landscapes of their traditional territory. And various Pueblo peoples across distinct pueblos in New Mexico and Arizona, such as Hopi, Zuni, Taos, and Tacoma, famous for their unique architectural traditions, agricultural practices, and vibrant ceremonial life centered around kivas and sacred dances. This list represents only a fraction of the vibrant indigenous cultures within the United States. Each of these nations, and countless others, maintains unique spiritual traditions that are integral to their identity and way of life, reflecting thousands of years of distinct cultural development and spiritual practice tied to specific lands and histories. In response to centuries of suppression and ongoing challenges, many Native American communities are actively engaged in powerful cultural revitalization efforts, demonstrating profound resilience and determination. These community-led initiatives are not merely about looking backward, they are about strengthening indigenous identity in the present and ensuring a vibrant future. Key among these are language immersion programs, which are critical for restoring the nuanced spiritual concepts embedded in native languages, as the very words used to describe spiritual entities and practices are often untranslatable into English without significant loss of meaning and spiritual depth. These programs, often taught by elders to youth, are literally rebuilding the foundations of cultural understanding. Efforts also include the revival of traditional arts and crafts, which are not merely decorative, but often embody spiritual narratives and communal values and are used in sacred ceremonies. Ceremonial revivals, reinstating practices that were once outlawed, often with elder guidance and intergenerational teaching to ensure authenticity and continuity, rebuilding communal bonds and spiritual strength, and the increasingly prominent land back movement. This movement is profoundly spiritual, aiming to restore indigenous stewardship over ancestral lands, recognizing that the health of the people is tied to the health of the land, and seeking to reclaim the reciprocal relationship with Mother Earth that was disrupted by colonization and extractive industries. This involves direct actions like the return of sacred sites, CO management agreements for national parks, and the reassertion of indigenous resource management based on tech. These efforts are not merely about preserving the past, they are about strengthening indigenous identity, healing historical trauma, asserting political sovereignty, and ensuring the continuity of vibrant cultures and spiritual paths for future generations, serving as powerful beacons of hope and self-determination. While this exploration emphasizes respect and ethical engagement, some might raise counter-arguments, suggesting a more open approach to cultural exchange. Some argue that spirituality is universal and knowledge should be shared freely, claiming that restricting access is elitist or that culture is fluid. However, Native American practices are deeply rooted in specific contexts, histories of immense suffering, and communal ownership, and sharing is often unequal due to profound power dynamics, with dominant cultures taking practices without consent or understanding. This isn't mere cultural exchange, it's often an extension of historical oppression, where the dominant culture continues to benefit from indigenous knowledge, while indigenous peoples themselves struggle for basic rights and recognition. Others claim their actions are just appreciation, not appropriation, genuinely believing they are honoring the culture. Yet, true appreciation involves consent, context, and a lack of commercialization, supporting indigenous voices and practitioners rather than commodifying sacred practices for external consumption. When sacred items become costumes, fashion trends, or commercial products, it strips them of their power, meaning, and sacredness, reducing them to mere commodities. Finally, some might argue they are just connecting to earth-based spirituality like their ancestors. While many cultures globally have such traditions, the most respectful and ethical path is often to research and reclaim one's own ancestral practices and traditions, rather than borrowing from historically oppressed cultures, which can inadvertently erase their specific struggles and unique knowledge systems while creating further harm by perpetuating patterns of exploitation and disrespect. This is not about division or creating barriers to genuine spiritual connection. It is about acknowledging distinct cultural pathways and ensuring indigenous peoples have the inherent right to define, protect, and control their own sacred heritage and spiritual destinies. Understanding Native American spiritual practices requires a deep appreciation for their unique worldview and the profound cultural heritage of indigenous peoples. It necessitates moving beyond superficial interpretations to recognize the depth, complexity, and sacredness of these traditions. This is not about exclusion, but about the right of indigenous peoples to define, protect, and transmit their own heritage on their own terms. For those interested in learning more, the ethical path forward involves seeking out authentic indigenous voices and sources, prioritizing books, articles, and media created by Native American scholars, authors, artists, and community members, directly supporting those who hold and transmit this knowledge. It also means supporting Native-led initiatives by investing in Native American artists, businesses, and cultural organizations, which directly helps indigenous communities thrive economically and culturally, enabling them to continue their revitalization efforts. Furthermore, it involves listening and learning with humility, understanding that not all knowledge is meant for everyone, and some sacred practices are closed to outsiders out of respect for their sanctity and purpose. Crucially, it means respecting boundaries and acknowledging that indigenous communities have the inherent right to determine how their cultural heritage is shared and utilized, and who is authorized to teach it. Finally, it entails advocating for indigenous rights by supporting legislation and movements that protect Native American religious freedom, sacred sites, land rights, and cultural sovereignty, including efforts against resource extraction on ancestral lands and promoting Native language revitalization. By practicing reciprocity in our engagement, giving back through respectful learning, advocacy, and economic support, individuals can contribute to a more just and appreciative understanding of Native American spirituality, honoring its resilience, profound wisdom, and vital place in the world.